Welcome to the Becoming More Me podcast, your show for learning how to be more and do less, especially in this crazy world that often expects us to do just the opposite. I'm your host, Teresa Lear-Levine. I am an EFT master practitioner, hypnotherapist, married mom of 4, and recovering perfectionist with ADHD and high-functioning anxiety. And these shows are all about helping you to navigate these sorts of things with grace and support and compassion and understanding. So today I'm going to share with you about a recent trip I took, and I'm going to share with you about my month of May in general, which was a very robust month, but specifically about the retreat that I took to Chilliwack, British Columbia with my business coaching group. And there's so much that happened during this that this is going to be a 2-part podcast, and I'm going to share the ins and outs of what happened on the actual trip, the emotions that I had, places that I visited and enjoyed, and actual happenings from the retreat, and how all of that processed for me, and the culmination of it after the retreat, which was as impactful, if not more so, than the retreat experience itself, which is hard to say because this retreat was blow your mind amazing and probably one of the deepest experiences I've had with other humans that I barely knew beforehand in my entire life. It all starts now. So I need to start by saying that I'm at a loss as to how to share everything that I want to share on what will probably be a 2-part podcast. However, I'm going to take it as a good sign that it is 11:11 a.m. where I am sitting right now, and that means to me that things are perfectly aligned and right on time. So I am just going to trust and believe that what comes through me right now is exactly what's intended to be heard by whoever is listening. So welcome. It is right now the very beginning of June, and May was a momentous month for me, and that is what I want to talk about specifically. I already talked on a podcast a few episodes ago about anxiety and travel and planning as I was getting ready to go away to the retreat that I attended from the 9th to the 12th of May, which was hosted in Chilliwack, British Columbia, which is not terribly far from the Vancouver and Kelowna area for people who are familiar. I have never been to that area, so I had a lot to get familiar with, but man, it's gorgeous there. And I was so grateful for the experience. And I'll address some of the things that perhaps I was anxious about in the last episode, but my true intention is to just share both things that were fun about the travel experience and also like the deep spiritual stuff that came through while I was there. So we were all kind of laughing because for those of us who attended, and there was 24 of us, I think, that was there, and that included people who were doing photography and cooking for us and simply there for the experience. Speakers and presenters were brought in during the time that we were there, but roughly about 24 people. So I went to the airport on that Thursday morning, and I think there was a little bit of extra mom guilt because I knew I was going to be away for Mother's Day weekend, and I have literally, up until this year, never been away from my own children on Mother's Day. And there's probably maybe been a Mother's Day that I haven't seen my own mom, but it has been few and far between. We almost always do something together. My sister, my mom, me, our families, typically some kind of a brunch, celebration, something of that nature. And that didn't happen this year in normal fashion either. So there was a feeling of guilt there. And I let myself sit with it and also realize like nobody was giving me a guilt trip necessarily. My mom is always very understanding about celebrating things whenever. And she just came this last weekend, which was a week after my birthday, to celebrate my birthday. That's great. We celebrated. And the week after Mother's Day, we went to the beach and we celebrated Mother's Day. So it's not that things aren't getting celebrated. It's just that they got celebrated at different times. And I'm grateful that my mom has always been flexible, especially when I lived in Florida and she was, still living in Delaware, and we couldn't always be together exactly on the holidays or anniversaries of things, but we always found time to celebrate and make it meaningful. And there was never any expectation for it to be a certain way. So, going to the airport, my husband dropped me off, which was lovely. I had an early flight and I went a little earlier than I needed to so that he would be able to get back and get the kids ready for school at a normal time and do his normal stuff for his workday, etc. And I could just feel it as I was getting closer to the airport, that feeling of the anticipation and the anxiety and the guilt. This tends to be a recurring thing with me when I travel for my business. No matter what business it's been over the years, there's always this voice in the back of my head that says, you don't actually have to go and do this. So why would you put yourself in harm's way or take time away from the people you love or miss a holiday in order to do this thing, which is not an obligation or a necessity? And I'm pretty good at fighting back against that voice because I know that these are the things that help me grow, that help me expand my own capacity, that teach me new things, that open my eyes in new and different ways. And for that, they're completely necessary. So said goodbye to my husband on the curb and walked inside. I did my best to pack light, but I still had a pretty large duffel bag to check. And what else did I have? I had a duffel bag to check, a rolling carry-on, and a backpack. That's what I traveled with. But for me, for a long weekend and also very fluctuating weather, it seemed there, where it would get quite cold at night and quite warm during the day when we were going to be there. And just not knowing, I just didn't know what to wear, honestly. So I had some extra choices along with me. But I don't think I overdid it. I was actually really proud of myself with how I packed. And sure, there were some things I did not wear at all and some things I wore more than I expected to, but I was glad that I had what I had. I felt comfort in bringing what I had, and I also didn't feel like I overdid it. I normally like to travel with two of my favorite pillows. I only traveled with one, and it worked out great. And there were a lot of things I left behind that I was very proud of myself for leaving behind. So I'm going to say that I did a good job packing light, even though by the standards of some other people that arrived on the trip with much less baggage than me, I haven't quite mastered it yet. And also, there were people who drove and had their vehicles and brought a lot more than I did. So it's all good. So my plane ride was easy and everything went on time. I enjoyed my time in the airport, and I like walking around the airport. I got some good steps in that morning and got myself a breakfast burrito and just hung out and tidied up some last minute tasks and got on the plane. I had not gotten a lot of sleep the night before, so I did intend fully to take a good nap on the plane. And I did. And I also got some good work done on the plane. I paid for Wi-Fi, I got things done, and for the rest of the weekend after I landed, I did not use my computer for anything. And it was lovely. And I had something really interesting happen that I feel like was a total blessing in retrospect, which is that my beloved Remarkable tab, I've talked about it before, especially on my episodes where I talk about how I plan my week and things of that nature. But if you're watching the video, you can see like it's an electronic tablet that you can use like a notebook. You write on it with a stylus pencil, and it can convert your writing to type. I actually almost never use that, but you can also import things. Like this is where I import my planning sheets for the weeks and months and can add my notes to them and reuse them and things of that nature so that I no longer go through a notebook or more every month in paper. I just use my Remarkable. Anyway, enough of a free advertisement for the Remarkable, although this is going to end up being a better advertisement for them as it goes on. it broke. So I got there and I was planning on using it. I didn't bring any like paper or anything. I was planning on using this to take notes when we had speakers or just to kind of jot things down because it's kind of laughable. This is touted as a business retreat and it was hosted by my mentors who I've had on the show before, Dan Harrison and Alexander Ohm. If you have not listened to those episodes, please go back and listen to them. They were from February of 2024, and you can learn more about them. And I will also put a link here in case you're interested in checking out their community on School. It's amazing and very spiritual business coaching. So the weekend in the retreat was there was business there. There was strategy there, but almost 100% of it was viewed through a spiritual lens. And the spiritual aspects of things went way deeper and crazier than I think any of us expected, even though I also don't believe any of us came with particular expectations. This is the first time that Dan and Alexander were running a retreat together for the Soulful Sales community. So we were all just excited to see what was going to happen. We knew who the speakers were going to be. We knew where we were staying and things like that, but we didn't know what the chemistry of the group would be like or how it would go. So that was part of the anticipation that I had on the last episode, as well as the air travel and everything else. So we landed and I had figured out a couple of people who were coming in at similar times as I was. This was kind of how I worked out the transportation dilemma. And I think I forgot to close the thought with when I landed and went to turn on my Remarkable, it didn't work. It wouldn't power on. It was originally stuck on the screen I had last used it on. I couldn't write, I couldn't change screens. And then I used my phone to look up what do you do when your Remarkable freezes, and it suggested trying to charge it for 12 hours, trying to force it to restart. I did all the things, and even the next day I couldn't get it to restart. At which point I just surrendered. I was like, you know what? I can do without it. I'll get everything I need, and I'm sure other people will take notes. Things will be recorded, and it's probably best this way. So that's what I did. And it felt so good. I know that when I used to go to different summits and retreats back when I was a nutrition and fitness coach, it was always encouraged to take notes. And I do believe there is definitely value to processing things through handwriting and thought and everything else. But I always ended up feeling like I went home with all of this stuff that I didn't quite know what to do with. And I had already, between my two ears and in my head, kind of figured out what it meant and what was intended for it. So it didn't bother me to not come home with a boatload of notes. And honestly, with as many downloads as I was getting all weekend, I couldn't have kept up and I would have been antisocial trying to record everything that was going through my head. So it was so much nicer to just be present. So landed and got in touch with a couple of the women who were flying in at similar times as I was, and that was nice. It just, for me, it felt very relieving to connect with other people in person and know, okay, we're going to get there together. That was all I needed to feel calm and at ease again. And from there, we took an Uber. There was three of us originally. We took an Uber to go get some sushi. I had not realized, although it makes perfect sense, that the Vancouver area is known for excellent sushi, as it is, West Coast, close to the water. And I will say that I had some of the best sushi that I think I've ever had, as far as just the freshness and the soft tenderness of the fish and the presentation with like dry ice, and it was gorgeous. Yeah, I couldn't have been happier. So I was really glad that one of the women who I had met up with had suggested that and that we were able to do it together. It was a really nice way to start the weekend together and get to know people a little bit more. One of the gentlemen that was also going to the retreat remembered where we said we were going to meet for lunch from like a group thread that we had, and actually ended up meeting us there, which was amazing. And then the four of us were able to share an Uber and make our way to Chilliwack. So we had lunch, we walked around Surrey, which was where the place we had sushi was. And then from there, and I should really, let me find the name of the place that we had sushi for you because it was really good and I should mention it. All right, it was Sushi Shogun on King George Boulevard. So if you happen to be in the area and you're looking for some tasty sushi, it was in, I think it was like a little strip mall. It didn't look like much from the outside, but the service was excellent. The food was excellent. The presentation was awesome. And we had a good time there. And for us, we had thought about going to downtown Vancouver. I know there's a lot of great places there, but we were trying to chart something that didn't really take us off the beaten path too much between the airport and Chilliwack. So Surrey made sense and worked out perfectly. So we walked around Surrey a little bit, found a coffee shop. I ended up getting myself a treat to eat later. I was stuffed from sushi, but I was still having paranoia about what kind of food is going to be available and all that kind of stuff. I'm somebody who feels very relaxed as long as I know that there are snacks and drinks available. So I got myself this most delicious pecan bar thing. It was kind of like a pecan pie bar, I guess. And I ended up eating that at like 10 o'clock that night when I was just super duper like out of my brain tired and had had a very, very long day, especially considering the 3 hour time difference. I had woken up in the 3 o'clock hour back on the East Coast and didn't go to bed until 10, 11 on the West Coast. So it had been a very long day, close close to a full day. And I think the tiredness had kicked in. So even though I don't normally eat anything after about 7 p.m., I very much enjoyed that before bed. And the rest of the weekend, my eating was so clean and wonderful. They brought in a chef named Michaela, and she was amazing. Used no recipes, made just super fresh, healthy, delicious, amazing food, a mix of carnivorous meals and vegetarian meals and all different things, but there was always lots of vegetables, lots of good protein, lots of fresh ingredients, sprouts and fruits and just high grade protein. And she made the most amazing dressings and sauces and used seasonings so incredibly well. So shout out to Michaela. You made my taste buds sing all weekend, and she also sang all weekend. It was lovely to just hear her voice kind of pouring out of the kitchen as we would sit in a circle outside or just randomly break into song, which was beautiful. So that was just a little part of the weekend that was obviously threaded throughout it because we ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks together every day. And she was one woman doing it all. And she did an amazing job. And I felt so good when I got back. So often when you go on vacation, you end up eating things that are not necessarily in alignment with how you like to eat. And I felt like all the comforts of home were there and there was healthy options everywhere. I didn't overdo it. I actually think I came back a little lighter than when I left. And that was lovely because usually it's the reverse issue. It's too much salt, too much fat, too much carbs, all that kind of stuff. But being at a business retreat with health coaches, mainly practitioners, doctors, all of those sorts of people as the main participants really changed the trajectory of what we all wanted to eat and do, how we wanted to move, all of that kind of stuff. So the food was amazing. And I was very delighted to have a bedroom all to myself, which was something that I had mentioned as a concern as I booked the trip. Originally, I thought my husband might come with me, but he wasn't able to. I'm just very particular about my space. I've never actually had to share accommodations in my life as far as a shared bedroom growing up or a dorm room or anything of that nature. I have always had my own room. And I guess I've been pretty spoiled by it. But unless I'm sharing a room with my husband or one of my kids, and even that's kind of pushing it sometimes, I'm very protective of my space. So the houses were kind of hilarious. And also, there's so many interesting little things you can kind of read into the theming here. But apparently, when Dan and Alexander rented them a few months ago, they looked different. At least the one did. And then it got themed since then. So what they ended up doing, because it was co-ed, they ended up having a house for the guys and a house for the girls. No one was there with a significant other or anything like that. So They broke it up, boys' house, girls' house, which worked out fine. And the boys' house was Monopoly themed. And I mean Monopoly themed. I'll have to post and share some more pictures, but there was a giant Monopoly board on the floor inside. There were huge Monopoly pieces that you could use. So, if you were the car in Monopoly, you were picking up a like 15 to 20-inch car that was probably 6 or 8 inches tall, like big, huge size pieces. Now, sad but true, or maybe not sad at all, because I didn't feel like we missed out on anything, even though we had life-size Monopoly, life-size chess, basketball court, all of these different things, like we could do cold plunges and saunas and hot tubs and things. I think all that got used all weekend was the hot tub. So yeah, we were pretty jam-packed with activities and conversation and taking care of ourselves so that we could enjoy everything. So we didn't really play any games, but we had a heck of a lot of fun together. So we all got settled, and the girls' house was Clue themed. So I grew up playing Clue. You know what I'm talking about. You got, Mrs. Peacock in the kitchen with the lead pipe, that kind of thing. Every bedroom was themed in a different character. So yeah, my room was Mrs. Peacock's room. It was entirely blue, and then it had it's just creepy. I'm like creeping out thinking about it. I'll see if I can get some pictures that can go on with this video. But so the room's totally blue, and like in Mr. Colonel Mustard's room, yellow. Mr. Green's room, green. Everything was themed out. Even like some of the rooms had maps on the wall, kind of the way that you saw the kind of Clue had the outlines of the rooms on the board game, and every room had a weapon in it too. So the room I was sleeping in, there's a picture of Mrs. Peacock on the one wall, and there's a picture of the rope on the other wall. So like if I'm sleeping on my side at night, I'm essentially looking at a noose. That was unsettling. And Mrs. Peacock is right over my head, hanging over the headboard. But here is what takes the creepiness factor just a little step further. All of the pictures of all of the characters were taken in the house where we were staying. So literally, however many months before, probably not too long ago, quote unquote, Mrs. Peacock was sitting on the bed that I'm sleeping in, having her picture taken. So the picture of her over my bed is her sitting on the bed that I'm sleeping in. And all the pictures were like that. So it was interesting, and also just really funny. And when you're with a group of people who have a real good grasp of consciousness and this matrix that we live in and everything else, we had some really interesting moments when we were in the middle of a particular ceremony a couple days later, where I ended up just laughing my head off with one of the other girls when we realized that we had actually created the Clue house, like out of our own thoughts, and had like manifested. And that was just, it was hilarious. It was absolutely hilarious. And some of the stuff that was Monopoly themed ended up coming up through the weekend too. So it was meant to be all the crazy theming, even though we didn't really practically use any of it. It all ended up getting woven into the tapestry that was our weekend. So Thursday, we all get settled, we have dinner together, we, check into our various places in these two houses, and then we had our first speaker experience. Now, our first speaker was coming to us from Bali. And if you've been listening to this episode, you may be thinking it's crazy to go away for the weekend with 24 people that you don't know very well. Or maybe you're thinking, how cool, and I'd like to do that too. Either way, what happens when you immerse yourself with other people in vulnerable ways is community like you've never experienced before. And while I can't recreate the retreat experience that I had in early May for you, or even for myself again, I can create an amazing experience for you in my community over on School. School is an awesome platform, and it is where I have housed my Becoming More Me free community for over a year now. I offer free coaching in there every week, as well as awesome ways for the community to come together and heal and support support each other. So if you're looking for more like-minded individuals who are interested in healing and personal growth, who are interested in understanding their nervous systems better and understanding their subconscious mind so that we can rewire things, regulate things, and nourish these parts of ourselves in a new way so that we show up differently in our lives and actually have the ability to bring into our physical reality all the things that we want with so much more ease, pleasure, and joy, I really want to see your membership request over on School. It will be a pleasure and honor to have you there, and I know that you will enjoy the over $15,000 worth of resources and coaching that you can find there as soon as you become a member. Can't wait to see you on School. He was Dan Bolton. So he spoke to us for a couple of hours via Zoom. It was morning for him, night for us, and gave us a whole new perspective on business and how to do it authentically and how to create experiments within our business and not feel like we have to commit to certain things, but rather to really have fun, to see what's working and what's not, play around with things, create a business that feels good to be in, which has always been important to me. And he had so many great ideas. I don't want to go too deep into it because, again, there's so much I can talk about here. But yeah, I was super tired by Thursday night. Friday morning, I got up and it was hard to sleep in because I usually wake up in the 4 o'clock hour on the East Coast, and it's technically 3 hours earlier where I am. So sleeping in until 7 would be like just sleeping really, really late at home. And I think 7 or 8 is when things were starting up. So anyway, I was up really early and I got up, I got dressed, and decided to take a walk. I had let people know in the group chat that that's what I was doing, and if they wanted to come along, they could. But I don't think anybody else was actually up that early. So I started to walk, and we were on the side of a mountain. And it was cool to get to explore it. But quite literally, my entire walk was either walking like 30 to 40 degrees downward or 30 to 40 degrees upward. Super steep either direction. And I don't really know the last time I did that much downhill or that much uphill walking. The kind of uphill walking where you're leaning forward and just pushing and your quads are on fire. And not having walked it before, all I had was the map on my phone. So I was able to look before I left the house and see that essentially I could make a loop. And that's what I did. I could roughly tell that it was going to be maybe 3 miles. And I think that is what it ended up being. It was a little over 3. So I just started walking. I started by going down. And then once I got to the bottom, it was time to go up, right? But you don't really know how far you're going to go up. Like I couldn't tell from where we were on the mountain how much more up there was up the road than how far I had already come. So once I started to go up, I noticed a certain amount of fright in my nervous system that was the unknown of how, I mean, obviously there's a certain known, it's only going to be at the worst a couple miles, right? And then you're walking downhill again. But not knowing and walking up these steep hills where sometimes you couldn't see more than 10, 20 feet ahead before you'd get to the next kind of where it level off a little bit and then go up again. It was fun to be able to relax into that. And it wasn't until I was about halfway through the walk that I was thinking, I have no idea what kind of wildlife is up here. You know, I'm sure there's bears or coyotes or who knows what, but that wasn't anything that was really crossing my mind as something to be fearful of. And so I just walked, I took it all in. I got to see the sunrise. The dandelions up there are massively bigger than they are here on the East Coast. And they were all opening up for the day and got passed by a few cars, but not many, not a whole lot. And I really enjoyed the walk. And also it was so difficult that it would have taken people saying they really wanted to take a walk again and do it together the next day for me to have done it, because it was an awful lot of huffing and puffing and just trying to figure out how much farther do I have to go, even though it was beautiful. I'm so glad I did it. I think I'm the only one that actually walked the loop the whole time that we were there. And as I got to about the last half mile, the same woman who met me in the airport came around the corner. And I was like so happy to see her and hug her and say good morning. And we walked together. She she wanted to see what it was like at the top. And of course, I was just finally on the downhill slope. And she says to me, "Oh, I just want to see the view from up there." And I don't want to spoil it for her because even from the top of the mountain that we were on, there were still mountains that were larger than what we were on that you could see. So it wasn't an expansive view like what you guys saw, maybe if you saw when I was on the top of that tower at Mohunk, where you could see for miles and miles and states, you could just see like to the next mountain. And it was a pretty view though. So I didn't want to talk her out of it. So I walked back up to the top again with her so that we could see the view together. And then we walked back down. And as we were walking back down to the house, we saw just the sweetest family of deer. And the deer there look a heck of a lot different than the deer here do. And they were not bothered by us at all. I really think we could have walked up to them if we wanted to. We didn't try to, but it was amazing how close we could get without them being startled. And there were some baby ones and some bigger ones, and it was it was just beautiful. So that was a highlight of my morning for sure. And when I got back home, a few days after I got back home, I ended up seeing a deer here that was the smallest baby I've ever seen on foot in our neighborhood, and got a little video. I've posted it on my Instagram and my socials if you want to see it. I just got a few seconds of it because I was driving, and I was just grateful because it was dodging cars that didn't want to be slowed down by a cute little baby deer, unfortunately. But man, it was so cute. So that was how my Friday started, and then we all gathered in an outdoor circle where we did some morning breath work and stretching and meditation together that Alexander led. And that was a beautiful way to start the day too. And we had wanted to be able to get into the hot tub, but we didn't quite time it right. So we did the hot tub. I think we did the hot tub the next, no, maybe I can't even remember. Two of the mornings we made it into the hot tub, one we didn't. I feel like Friday we didn't, but we did have a great time stretching and getting ready for the day. And Friday and Saturday were just absolutely jam packed. Honestly, by Saturday, I was facing a little bit of exhaustion, and it was kind of bumming me out because I felt like I was mentally missing some of the things that were happening until the afternoon, because I was just having a really hard time continuing to push through everything that I was trying to mentally process and take in because there was so much. But it was all in a really relaxed environment where we were literally just sitting around the house, mostly outdoors the whole time, whether we were in the shade or out in the sun, working on masterminding our own businesses, sharing ideas with each other, hearing things from speakers, learning from Dan and Alexander, who did a lot of speaking also, and taking in amazing guests. So I'm going to continue this episode and talk about what we did for the rest of the weekend. And that's when things really get interesting. But it was a great trip. As far as all of the things that I was having a little bit of anxiety about beforehand, they all worked out as things always do. And I'll talk more about this on the next episode, but I came home from that trip with zero anxiety, like a peaceful floating state that I have never experienced that lasted almost 2 weeks. And it was so significant and such a shift and so glorious to experience. And I wish I knew what the recipe was of exactly what happened, but I will share more about what happened over those last couple of days that were so jam-packed, because I really do think that many generations and many millions of people were impacted and will continue to be impacted by the healing work that we did together, especially on Saturday in the presence of Dr. Divi. So I'm going to share more about that on the next episode. And I thank you for listening today. I know you have so many choices when it comes to what you listen to on podcasts, and I'm grateful that hearing about my travels and the ways that I'm learning and growing interests you. And I'm always open to your feedback and your ideas for future episodes. So shoot me a DM over on Instagram, and I would love to hear from you. And thank you so much for listening today. Have a great day. Thanks for spending some of your precious time with me today. If you loved this episode, please leave a review or simply share it with someone else who would get great benefit from it too. If you share on social media, please tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. And if your inner critic is still trying to argue with those facts, hit me up. We've got work to do.